Thank you, Kristen and John. So today with me, I have some very amazing people. I'm going to do a quick introduction of them right now. With me, I have Lieutenant Colonel Laura Ramos, who is the Strategic Partnerships Division Chief at AFWERX, and she's dedicated to delivering interpersonal self-directed violence reduction and next-generation resiliency solutions. She leads outreach and engagement with external partners across the Department of Defense, industry, and academia. Also, Major Sean Maday is Google's Chief Technology Officer and a U.S. Air Force reservist and focuses on working with the Department of Defense. Sean started his career as a U.S. Air Force intelligence officer. And Matthew Renze is a Microsoft MVP in AI, data science consultant, Pluralsight author, and a public speaker. He's taught over 300,000 software developers and IT professionals how to build intelligent software systems. He's also the co-organizer of Antarcticonf, the first ever technology conference in Antarctica. So in 30 seconds, I'd like to know each of you, what does the base of the future mean to you? Laura?
So first off, as a logistician, the base of the future for me means seamless, uninterrupted communication, real-time accurate data, whether it's tracking people, assets, or the supply chain. Overall, I'm looking at being able to work in a secure and resilient facility, efficient customer service, whether it's personnel services or medical services. Then, of course, being able to work around airmen who are resilient as well, emotionally, physically, or mentally.
Cool. Matthew, how about you?
So for me, there are three main components to the base of the future. There's people, there's processes, and technology. And by people, we mean we want to create a culture of innovation so that individuals feel empowered to be innovative, to make observations, run experiments, test hypotheses, and continuously self-improve. And by processes, we mean we want agile, lean methodologies. We want to be highly adaptable and iterative in our processes and use data-driven approaches, promote experimentation, fail fast and fail quickly so that we can pivot when necessary. And by technology, we mean we want to look at the entire Air Force base as a cyber physical system. It's an IoT platform that's sensing its environment, collecting data. It's a data science platform that allows us to make real-time decisions, data-driven decisions. And it's an AI platform that allows for automation and improved operational efficiency.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, to me, it really has, the base of the future has the infrastructure to take advantage of human capital in new and innovative ways. So often today, our airmen get stuck in lines. They get stuck waiting for a machine to load. They get stuck waiting for a machine to log in. And I think if we can remove that toil, we can take advantage of the awesome intellectual capability that airmen bring to the fight.
So following on to that, Sean, how do you define innovation?
Yeah, for me, I go with kind of the dictionary definition of a new method, a new product, a new idea, but I bifurcate it to kind of break it out into evolutionary versus revolutionary kind of innovations, right? Those that are evolutionary kind of are marginal improvements. Those that are revolutionary are somewhat mutinous. They challenge the status quo. And then I think for me, the third part of that definition is always about execution, because ideas are cheap. We all have them. But in order for something to really be innovative, to be game changing, it requires bringing together people, bringing together technologies, and executing in order to affect a change.
Laura, do you have anything to add?
Just to piggyback on that, again, we're looking at turning a thought or an idea into reality, doing something different, right? And a lot of times we think of products, but we're also looking at process as well. I mean, a good example is the Toyota lean manufacturing. One example I also like to give the folks is, General McRaven's talk about SEAL training and how in the beginning people would go, feet first. And then one day somebody figured out, well, let's go a different way, forward facing and pulling ourselves there. And that was innovative, revolutionary unto that itself.
Matthew, how would you approach innovation?
So as a data science consultant and a certified agile coach, it's my job to help organizations innovate using data science, machine learning, and AI. And so we do this by creating a series of changes to the culture of the organization. We encourage or incentivize certain innovative decision-making patterns or practices practices, and we disincentivize or discourage certain things that stifle innovation. For example, in the agile world, we value things like individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, and responding to change versus just blindly following a plan. And we also do other things like encourage hypothesis-driven experimentation, highly iterative development cycles, data-driven decision-making, automation with AI, and embracing things like smart failure and pivoting when necessary.
So how do they do that at Google, Sean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, a lot of it is cross-pollinating processes and technologies from other domains, right? I think so many innovative and groundbreaking solutions aren't necessarily about reinventing the wheel, but it's about bringing together unique ideas, unique perspectives, unique capabilities that might have been proven elsewhere, and applying them in a new and novel way can be game-changing.
Laura, why is innovation so difficult?
Well, coming up with an idea is easy, right? But there's several issues that compound innovation. The first one is legacy, right? This is how we've always done things. You're talking about culture change. So culture change comes fear. What's going to happen to my job? Are you going to add more work to me, for me? The other thing is oftentimes organizations aren't designed for disruptive change. We're more focused on execution and efficiency. So we're looking at hierarchy, metrics, operational experience, processes, bureaucracy, quality assurance, financial issues, standardization, incremental change. That may sound familiar to a lot of you folks. And the other thing is we often need good leadership, and sometimes that's lacking, right? So you need a leader that can be able to remove stovepipes and integrate, right? Create that interaction. You want that for them to be able to create that space for innovation. You want a leader that listens, that focuses on strategy, guidance, and building strong relationships and communication. The other thing that was kind of mentioned earlier is you have to be fast, right? Otherwise you become the new Google, the new Facebook, the new Amazon, the new Pied Piper. You guys, if that may ring true to you, that sounds like you're probably one of those fun nerds, or you watch a lot of HBO. But basically, you're facing competition, and sometimes priority changes, right? So when priority changes, the funding sometimes goes with that. And then finally, you need to be a good storyteller to be able to create that change or that innovation.
So what are some real life examples in today's Air Force? Sean, I want to start with you.
Yeah, one that I saw recently I was really blown away by was a gentleman by the name of Ray Stone, Major Ray Stone up in Elmendorf, C-17 pilot, doing some amazing work to remove the toil of scheduling C-17s from the workflows. Their typical processes would take days to match up people. And Major Stone took the time to learn some JavaScript and created a really innovative application of Google Calendar to reduce down what was taking many man-hours of work into a matter of minutes. And I think it's just an awesome example of somebody recognizing a problem, removing human toil from the situation, and leveraging automation.
Laura?
Well, prior to moving to the Integrated Resilience Office, I worked at the Acquisitions, Logistics, and Product Support Office. So there I got to see a lot of innovative things being done, whether it's in the area of additive manufacturing, 3D parts, and eventually 3D facilities, right, is in the works. One thing the Rapid Sustainment Office is working on is something called the Advanced Manufacturing Olympics, which is set to take place in October. So that, gives us the opportunity to check out the latest technology that's going on there and kind of like share information. We have digital twins. So we're working currently with Wichita State University's National Institution of Aviation and Research, kind of virtually mapping the B1B. And then, so there's those tangent things. And then I'd like to mention that we're also creating innovation hubs. Right now, the logistics community is very excited about something we call Tesseract. So that's an office set up for us to bring in ideas that would help us not only build the base of the future, but also form technology that can help us with our logistics under attack scenarios.
And Matthew, from an industry perspective, what are you seeing that the Air Force is doing innovatively?
Well, I can't speak specifically to the Air Force, but I can tell you about some things that are happening in the more general kind of software industry that I think are really exciting going forward. And the first of those is self-supervised learning. So with traditional machine learning, we essentially we have humans label all the data. So this picture's a cat, this picture's a dog, and so on and so forth for potentially millions of pieces of data. And with self-supervised learning, we use some built-in structural component of the data in order to train the lower layers of the network using that structural component. For example, we might remove a pixel from an image and then have the algorithm guess what color that pixel should be, or remove words from sentences and have the algorithm or model guess what the word should be. And then we use that to train the underlying layers of the deep neural network so that we can use transfer learning with a much smaller set of labeled data in order to train the higher levels of the network for a very specific task. And this is significantly more efficient and highly generalizable to a lot of different problems. So it's pretty big, and it's happening right now.
So following on to that, how do you spot those opportunities for innovation, Matthew?
So I believe there's three main components. There's essentially education, empowerment, and encouragement. And by education, we're essentially trying to educate everyone in the organization about the basics of innovation and technology. I mean, you can't expect someone to build a data-driven solution if they don't understand the basics of data science, or an AI solution if they don't understand machine learning, at least the basics. They don't have to be an expert, but they have to at least understand what's possible or realistic and economically viable. Second, you have to empower the individuals by to identify opportunities for innovation and propose solutions to those problems. And you do this by essentially giving everyone permission in the organization to observe their environment, identify problems, and propose solutions. And then we want to encourage or incentivize innovation by rewarding those that identify real-world problems and propose workable solutions. And over time, this essentially creates a feedback loop within the organization where we end up with a culture where everyone feels comfortable enough to actively spot opportunities for innovation and then propose solutions to these problems.
Sean, how do you create that culture?
Yeah, and I think it starts at the top, right? I think leaders, senior leaders, have a big role in. You can't ordain innovation, right? You can't just thou shalt innovate. But what you can do is create an environment where innovation and collaboration will evolve organically. And I think that cultural message about willingness to take risk, a willingness to try new things, and really empowering people, removing human toil, so that your people have the time and energy to step away from a problem, think about it, and think about novel and creative ways to do things differently.
So Laura, as an airman innovator, how could you get other people behind your idea?
Well, I brought some props with me. So one is, I recommend that folks read this book. It's called Think Outside the Building. And in it, the author, Elizabeth Moss Cantor, basically says that you need to have a plan. You need a strategy, right? That's involves willing to take risk. It's building relationships. And then, of course, being able to communicate and tell your story well. Another thing I highly recommend folks doing. So I saw an article a couple days ago in War on the Rocks by Captain Garrett Custance. I think he works with AFWERX. And the title of the article is Commanders Need to Know Innovative Acquisitions. So basically, he argues that successful commanders are those who know how to navigate the bureaucracy. And if you go to business school, they call that the blue ocean strategy. So basically is, instead of trying to compete or meet the bureaucracy head on, you circumvent and create new opportunities for you. And basically making them irrelevant. The other thing is, innovation, you have to be resilient and persistent. So oftentimes I go back to two quotes. The first is Teddy Roosevelt, who said, believe you can, and you're halfway there. And the other quote I kind of subscribe to is from the Stoic philosopher Seneca. And he says, difficulty strengthens the mind. So basically you need that mental moral strength to overcome difficulty and to be confident in your ideas and what you believe in.
Amazing. So I have a question for all of you, and I'll start with Matthew on this one. So what role should senior leadership play in innovation? I know Sean touched on this already, but Matthew?
So after many years as a data science consultant working with organizations on these kind of transformations, having buy-in from the senior leadership is probably the single biggest asset or benefit or detriment to the successful adoption of a change of company culture, especially a culture of innovation. So if you have the senior leadership's buy-in and support, then your job is essentially half done, like the previous quote. However, if they're resistant or in the worst case, actively fighting against these changes, there's almost nothing that you can do to ensure a smooth transition. It's going to be a tough ride. And this is why it's critical that we educate the senior leadership on the value proposition of innovation and get their buy-in on this new way of thinking. And you have to realize that the new way of doing this, the new business model, is very different than the traditional business model everyone's been taught. And it feels really tough to make this transition. So it's a tough sale. But however, if you can get them to see the big picture and understand why these modern lean data science AI practices actually work, they'll lead the organization in the right direction. And this just requires explaining the why to them in a way that resonates or essentially, moves them forward. And after you have their buy-in, essentially their role should be as follows. They, become advocates for change of the company culture. They should encourage and incentivize innovative behaviors and discourage or disincentivize stagnant behaviors. They should remove impediments to success. And most importantly, they really need to lead by example.
Sean?
I think for me, it's a lot about creating an environment with psychological safety, making people feel welcome. But then also senior leaders need to recognize that not everybody is going to have the same risk tolerance. And a guy named Everett Rogers back in 1957 came up with this diffusion theory of innovation. And it's a bell curve where on the left you have your innovators and on the far right you have your laggards. And nobody on that curve is wrong. I wouldn't want to be part of an organization that was all innovators. Nothing would ever get done, right? And so I think senior leaders need to be able to look at an organization, understand where their people rack and stack in terms of their appetite for early adoption, and bring those skill sets, bring those comfort levels together to create the best possible operational outcomes.
Great. Laura?
So first of all, I think it's important that we remind our people that we are the descendants of the Wright brothers. So innovation is in our Air Force DNA. Right. The other thing is I recommend and push folks to go back and read the 9/11 Commission report. And it talks about the various breakdowns that occurred. But one thing that stands out there is this quote, which is the most important failure concerning the 9/11 attacks was one of imagination. So we need to make sure we continue to build and create and innovate and not forget those lessons. And I think the most important thing is we need to build a culture that's focused on people. So it takes us listening, right? And asking people what can make their jobs better. Building relationships. We want to create that agile environment where we develop high performing teams. And important to that is creating diverse teams. The other thing is simplicity. We want to create a culture where people are eager to learn and they're always curious. A supportive, safe community where people can feel free to communicate, take risk, unafraid to make mistakes. And then as leaders, we need to make sure we equip folks with the resources that they need. We want to build a flatter structure versus a hierarchy. We want to be more open to experimentation, ideas and failures, focus on innovation, have a high risk for appetite, build ambitious targets, right? Challenge our airmen to innovate and provide them with clear directions at the same time. And then I think just as important is you want to focus on leadership development and succession. And finally, you want to be able to celebrate those ideas. That's
great. Now I have a couple of questions from our crowd if you guys are into hearing some ones from those. All right. So one question is, how can we award innovation and create the space for that? Sean, you'd mentioned creating a space for innovation. So do you have any ideas on how to award people for that?
Yeah, I think, part of the process has to recognize that contributions are going to come in unconventional ways and unconventional places, right? And so I think, in the military in particular, it's hard. At Google, if somebody does a great job, we can give them a bonus. We actually have a system inside of Google where we call peer bonuses. So 5 times a quarter, we can give each other a peer bonus that is redeemable for cash value. And that's very empowering because that's not coming from management, that's not coming from leadership, that's coming from your peers. And so in the absence of being able to give monetary donations, I would love to see units foster this idea of letting peers nominate their coworkers who have done great things to get some sort of added incentive, whether it's time off or maybe incentive rides and things like that. So.
Awesome. And Matthew, people are a little bit hesitant for this future world of only digital. So how can you make them feel better about that there still will be a place for human touch?
Well, I think the thing we have to recognize about technology is that it goes through curves as well. And we refer to the second half of the curve as the postmodern phase of the curve. So we start using a technology, we see where it works well, and then we go kind of overboard with the technology and we use it in places it probably shouldn't be used. So then there's a pushback societally where we see people, almost a backlash to using technologies in the ways that don't make sense. And then we, over time, essentially use the technology where it makes most sense and then have humans where they make most sense and come up with a balance between these two things. And we've seen this with just about every kind of technology over time, unless we haven't hit that peak yet, which I think we'll see that peak with things like social media and with AI and data science here before too long. We'll see what things work extremely well with computers and we'll see what things work better with humans.
Great. And Laura, our last question is for you. How do we know if something is disruptive or radical?
Yeah, that's a tough question, right? I like to say they're a little bit of both. Disruptive is, you're used to using, let's say, some type of technology one way all the time, right? And it's also, I'd say, like the iPhone. The original intent was to use it as a regular telephone, but now we're using it to, get on the internet, right? The other thing is, how do we view technology and the resources it provides? It's kind of like, a shift there to where, for instance, the automobile, we're focused on performance of the vehicle. And now we're looking at how does it help the consumer or the person that's driving the vehicle, right?
Great. Now, just as we're closing out, 30 seconds from each of you on how can people find you if they want to continue the conversation. Sean.
Yeah, thank you. I am privileged to work with a great team of technologists at Google who are really passionate about helping the Department of Defense navigate the new realities of big data machine learning. So reach out. My email address is just smaday@google.com, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Cool. Matthew?
The best way to reach me is through my website. I have all of my contact information, all of my online courses, essentially everything I do that you might find interesting, you can find on my website, www.matthewrenze.com.
Great. And Laura?
So for air and space professionals, I'm on the global. You can find me there. LinkedIn is also one avenue. And then I'm sure if you reach out to the AFWERX folks, they'll be able to give you my contact information as well.
Awesome. So any closing words that anyone wants to say?
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say it's an exciting time to be in the Air Force and have this great opportunity standing in the line from Hamilton to be in the room where it happened. So lucky to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So off we go back into the wild blue yonder.